everyone. Welcome. I'm super excited because today we are taking a topic from you. We're taking a topic about really having homeschooling in a bilingual family. Like, how does that work? But more often, or more than that, I want to talk about teaching multiple languages in general. So whether you're from a bilingual family or not, whether you're in a bilingual family, or if you don't and you're just looking to add languages, we're going to talk about with Melissa here the advantages and maybe some challenges that come with being in a bilingual family, because she knows more about this than anybody else I know. She is a language expert. She's super amazing. Melissa Muir here with us today. She has been with us before on several other episodes. I guarantee you guys watch those, listen to those episodes again, because they are fantastic. She is not only just a homeschool mom in general, but she is also a language expert in teaching and learning languages. She's multilingual, and she does translation. She does teaching classes. She's also certified to teach language, and she does an amazing job with homeschooling her kids and balancing all of these things, which that is one of our previous episodes. So balancing the act of being a busy mama. And so that you should definitely listen to. But today we're going to be talking about the languages and really getting those languages. Like, what are the benefits of having other languages? Now, you guys know I was a high school English teacher, and I actually really find just the topic of languages, I don't even know what else to call it, but the idea of language in a culture, very fascinating. I studied this in college. It was something with Native American languages, and it was fascinating the way that your language shapes your worldview and your culture. And so we're going to talk more about that today. But I just am really excited to have Melissa on. She is so fantastic, you guys. You've probably seen her everywhere on her YouTube channel and all of her Facebook homeschooling groups. But she is seriously so amazing at teaching kids, and she has a great energy. And this is like, the language is her jam. And that's what I really love that we're chatting today about this, because this was definitely something that you guys asked us to talk about. So, Melissa, can you share with us a little bit about just your background in language learning and teaching, and why this topic is so fascinating?
Yeah, it's I love that you touched on all of that, because this is such a deep well. But anyway, I come from a monolingual, very suburban family where we just spoke English at home. But as you do, you get put into a middle school where your 8th grade year, usually you got to start taking a foreign language. And so I started taking Spanish, enjoyed it, wasn't like super jazzed about it until I got to high school. My Spanish 2 teacher, this little woman from West Virginia. I went to school in Virginia, but she would travel in, and she did not have the best Spanish. She was not like this like overly creative teacher, but she said, "Hey, you're really good at this." And I was like, "Hey, thanks." And that set me off on this like trajectory of being really excited about learning something, finding something that I was actually good at, and being ready to kind of usher in other kids to this amazing world. And so that's where I started, but went on to major in Spanish linguistics at the University of Virginia, while I also got my master's in teaching. And then went on to spent some time in South America, came down to Ecuador, met my husband here, but went back to Virginia to teach for a year, taught Spanish to gifted middle school kids in a trailer for my first year of teaching. It was wild, but you know what? I'm so glad for that trailer, Katie. I mean, for any teachers out there, you guys are all like, ooh, but like, it was so fun. We could be so raucous. And with a language, you really want kids talking. And so you don't want the other teacher, neighbor teacher coming over, like, shh, quiet down. So we had so much fun. We created crime scenes to learn about interrogatives: who, what, where, when, why, por qué pasó? Why did this happen? ¿Quién era? Who did it, right? Who was it? And so you can just, this is so applicable. Language is life, and we're using it all the time. So everybody's got that framework in here. Could be different depending on the language that they grew up with. But it's really fun to kind of dig into that. And if you're in your own home, bringing in other languages, whether you have those skills or you're bringing in another teacher to do that, that's something that you can really draw on. So I hope we can kind of dig into that today, because there's no reason not to. There's no reason not to. There are so many ways to do this, whether you're bilingual, whether you're looking to outsource, or whether you're looking to kind of find some way to do this, whether if the budget allows or whatever. That would be my goal today, is kind of help people see that this is a really doable thing.
Absolutely. I'm so excited about that. And you guys, who wants to be in Melissa's class? I do. That sounds so fun. That is the way that people learn, right? The way with that TPR, that total personal response, that kind of really just living the life, right? And using it as part of your world. I love that. Yeah. And so Melissa living in with herself being bilingual, but also her whole family is bilingual. And so I think that's really amazing, something that we are going to touch on for sure. So when you think about, being a bilingual family, and having these different languages in your home all the time, I feel like it can, one of the challenges might be to, how much do you spend on each language? Like, what is the balance in a way that would best set your kids up for success in the world? Because I feel like a lot of families who are bilingual have that concern that, oh, I got to do this amount of English, I got to do this amount of something, so that make sure that I'm there, but I want to honor our other language as well. So What do you think what are the challenges there?
Yeah, so the answer is not double. You're not going to do double the homeschool day. English is happening right now, and then we're going to do Spanish. No, like whatever your two languages are. I'm going to go ahead and reference English and Spanish just because that's what we use daily. But our kids are also learning French too, so there's a portion of that as well. But when you're reading, you want to kind of bring in these reading skills in the more challenging language. A veteran homeschool mom, bilingual homeschool mom here, told me, okay, make sure they're reading in English really well. And then they're going to start reading in Spanish. Spanish is super easy. It's 1-to-1. The letter makes the sound in almost every case, right? And so that was like, oh, okay, all right, let's do that. And it's worked. Okay, so a lot of times that's our first doubt. Is it going to work? Am I going to mess them up? Is there a case when you don't want to do this? Yes, but it's often a little late to understand why. So here's what that case is. It's learning disabilities. And so sometimes about these from birth. There's going to be a delay here. There's going to be something is a little bit different. Neurodiversity, right? But a lot of times we learn those when kids start to read. Oh, letters are being jumbled a little bit. Numbers are being jumbled a little bit. There's a little bit of difficulty there. Let's look into it. And usually they're 5, 6, 7, 8 by that point, and it's a little late. So that's the one time when you're kind of not advised to bring in another language. But for the most part, the vast majority, it's going to be fine. Even in a lot of those cases, bilingualism is totally cool in a learning context. And you're really working on getting them to read in those languages first, right? This is the K to 2 kind of realm where we're learning to read. And then beyond that, we're going to read to learn. So it's very similar to what a regular school day would look like. But you're going to bring in some extra resources. For us, this was a really simple example of how we did this. I didn't want to overwhelm them with writing from the time they were little. I love writing, I teach writing. Like, I think it's cool. This is one of my favorite things to do, but I knew this is going to need to be gradual. So what we did with first grade, for example, was write one sentence in English and then translate to Spanish. Translate yourself, right? It's meaningful. It's my words. I'm not, what is this? I don't know what this is, right? They understand what the sentence means. So they're going to take their own meaning and translate it to the other language. Now, do they sometimes have to ask or look up a word? Sure. But that's where your home library is going to come in. So when you're having baby showers, when you're gift giving for baby showers, ask for bilingual books. They print these. We have The Very Hungry Caterpillar with both languages on the same page. I don't want to go off on too many tangents here, but the fact that they're on the same page makes them equal. And I hope this isn't still happening, but a lot of times kids will prioritize or socialize one language over the other. This one's cooler. This one, I'm embarrassed when I speak this. We don't want that. We want them to be equal from the time they're tiny. So if you can fill your bookshelf or fill your friends' bookshelves with those types of books, that's fantastic, because, again, those become their dictionaries when they're doing that sentence to sentence translation. So butterfly, what? Oh, mariposa. That's kind of long. And I go, yeah, but you've seen that word before. Oh yeah, they run over, they get the book, they're the one in charge. So as much as possible, put it back on them, give them the chance and the tools to kind of get into this. But I would say from a young age, that's a great way to do this. That's assuming you've got somebody who's bilingual at home, okay? And they're hearing all of this. From birth, our kids heard me speak Spanish. They spoke to me in Spanish and my husband, to me in English and my husband in Spanish. But we were very strict is the wrong word, but if they would say, hey, mom, can I have some agua? I'd be like, huh? Can I have some water? I'm like, yes, absolutely. And so they know I'm the English person, he's the Spanish person. What happens if you aren't strict bilingual? You know, I'm the English person, you're the Spanish person. We have friends who have made the choice. One person is the Spanish person, even though they're native English speakers. They learned Spanish in high school just like I did, right? But they've taken on this burden because they realize, hey, this is really important. And one of us is able to, we're going to. And so they've learned, you know, the home words, the heart words. Hey, sweetie. Hey, dear. Hey, whatever. Right? In Spanish. Ah, mija. Ay, querida. Right? All these little sweet words, affectionate words that are you want to say to your kids. But if you're the Spanish person, you're going to be using those words. And so there's a lot that goes in here, like you mentioned, culture and all the awareness around certain topics. But I think that is a lot of what goes on in the beginning with bilingual homeschooling. And you get to choose how much you want to do. One more example, I'll give you one more example, but math. So our math books, we use Horizons from AOP, and it's an English math curriculum. But my husband does math with them. Are they speaking in English? Heck no. He's reading the instructions, and actually the kids are reading the instructions to him, and he goes, oh, what's that? Even. That means par. What's that one? Odd. That means impar. Oh, okay. And so they're basically teaching him and working through this in a conversation and, you know, doing math in Spanish. Do they know the English words now? Yeah, because it's printed in their book. Do I sometimes ask them about it? Sure. But that's how our family does it. Are there Spanish curriculums out there? Obviously. Yes, of course. And you can get them. But I think it's just a question of cost and convenience and what works with your family in terms of how much and who is going to be teaching.
That is so fascinating. I absolutely love that because they're not in the math example. They're not only are they learning the math, but they're learning both languages at the same time. So that's amazing because they're learning the language of math in English, and then they're learning the language of math in Spanish as well. And that's so cool because there's so many different thinking skills going on there. And we're going to get off of that tangent, I'm sure, but there's so many cool things there. And so thinking about I love how you have, you can speak Spanish, obviously, so fluently. So, but you're the English person and your husband is the Spanish person, and they know what language to switch to. And that's one thing that I talked about in my newsletter this morning about that is something that kids do really well. So I'm sure you can talk about this more than I can, but I do know that kids learn language so easily the younger that they are, and that they don't actually have to do the translation thing where like we think in English and then we translate it into Spanish or whatever. We as if we're one primary monolinguistic and then we're learning another language, like they can actually compartmentalize those two. So tell me more about that. Like how easy is it for the kids to pick that up?
It was natural, but I'm not going to say it was like, oh, this is going to work great. Like,
right.
We were nervous until our kids were like, I don't know what, about a year old, when they start like really like putting sentences together and stuff like that. And so a kid came up to me and said, can I have some water? I go, no, go ask Dad real quick. Daddy, ¿puedo agua? And I was like, we both looked at each other and we were like, it worked. It worked. So like, that was amazing. That was so cool. So it's about context for kids. We have a lot of bilingual friends here that are Ecuadorian, but also speak perfect English. And so our kids will, again, not the right term, but just racially profile people. They'll be like, you're Ecuadorian, you're going to speak Spanish to me. And so they'll walk up to my friends and she'll look at me and be like, you want me to speak Spanish? Should we just keep going in English? And so it's really funny because it is very natural, right?
They're reading social cues. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so their friendships, we have a lot of homeschool friends here who are bilingual, trilingual as well. And we'll have these play dates that are so confusing to me as the mom, where I'm like, I don't know what they're going to speak today. But like, we'll see what the game is. So if they're playing capture the flag and Ecuadorian friend number 1 just went to camp the other week and it was a Spanish speaking camp, they're going to call it captura la bandera. And I'm like, okay, great. That was Captura la Bandera. Can I tell you about when I played it at camp and it was called Capture the Flag? And so a lot of what I do as, the English support person in a social situation, because they are reading these cues and that's where a lot of this happens, is providing other context in the form of story. So we know stories are super effective. We love listening to stories. And my kids will say, hey, can you tell us a mom story from when you were little? Can you tell us a story about your life? And so I try to do that and try to connect it with something that they're doing here and say, hey, it's a little bit different in this way, but basically we were doing the same thing. So yeah, lots of social cues that they pick up on. But even then, they are going to have preferences. I wouldn't get too stressed if they do have preferences. Our kids will read in Spanish, but they don't want to really. We've done some supports there with audiobooks. So we have the Libby app, and you can get pretty much any audiobook that your public library has connected to that card. And so we'll put the audiobook on in their ears and they'll have the physical book in their hands. And that helps as well, just to keep the cognitive burden a little bit lighter. I don't like reading in Spanish, and so I prefer to read in English. It's just one of those, enjoyment activities. Do they need to? Yeah, they do. And so we pull on those resources. There are lots of great digital libraries where you can get books in Spanish if you're not in a place to pick them up in physical form. But obviously your library is a really great place to start. So I would say we keep coming back to books. I feel like
hey man, it's super important. It's super important, right? And so my husband also teaches second language learners and in actual public school. But in one of the things that and I have before as well, but one of the things that we notice is that kids come in with a very fluent conversational language as their primary language, but they don't have academic language and in that language. So getting that part is totally different than just being able to have a conversation, because like you're talking about with the math, having that math language in their primary language and then their secondary language, that's so key. And a bit in the ability for them to further their education in both languages, right? So how do you make sure that what are some of the issues that you see with that, and how do you make sure that, I feel like you already kind of talked about that with the books and everything, but how do you make sure that doesn't happen?
No, but still it is important. And I feel like, when we think about language outside of school, and this is so much of what we try to do in homeschool, right, is be like, we're not going to live in school all of our lives. Let's be ready for the real world, right? But this is one instance where if they're going to go study in Spain later on, or wherever they choose to go, right, they need to know how to talk about editing a paragraph, right? How do you say period? How do you say comma? How do you say apostrophe? How do you say capital letter, right? How do you say introduction, conclusion? All these things that we use in their writing, for example, but also like following instruction words, commands. If they look at a command in Spanish, they're going to be like, what? That's a little weird. I think they conjugated that verb wrong. And then they're going to realize, oh, it's a command. It's telling me to do something, right? And so giving them that critical thinking ability to be able to say, what am I reading? Am I reading instructions? Okay, they're probably going to tell me, because I know in English, like my mom says, write one paragraph. Okay, that's a command. All right, I'm going to be looking for words like that. So it's drawing on prior knowledge. Are they seeing it in one language? Do they have a frame of reference for it? So giving them that opportunity, but also giving them the opportunity to express and ask questions. So this is where a lot of what happened with that writing that I mentioned, in first grade, we had them write one sentence in English and one sentence in Spanish. Well, that went up to, sixth grade. And so they're writing paragraphs every day in both languages. And I feel like you and I have talked about this before, but I love Google Docs. And so I'll sit down at one computer and they'll sit down at another at the same table, literally our kitchen table, one end and the other. And I'm not over their shoulder. I'm not coffee breathing in their face, right? I have these memories from when I was in middle school, and I was like, I'm not going to recreate that. But I'll be in the doc, and they'll be in the doc, and I'll highlight, and I'll say, okay, what's this? But again, we're doing it in both English and Spanish. So I'm able to make that contrast and say, hey, you know how you did this in English? Actually, in Spanish, we don't need to capitalize that. Days of the week, famously, months, things like that. We don't capitalize in Spanish. And so they're going to be like, whoa, that's wild. It's crazy. But it's not something I need to directly instruct them on because they're discovering it daily while we're doing this writing stuff. And so it's not a direct instruction. It's more of a discovery. And that's super important for keeping this enjoyable. A lot of times I think in homeschool, we just want it to be more enjoyable than maybe just the typical bookwork and assignments that we might have in regular traditional school settings. And so that's one way I think that we can kind of bring in that academic language too, is just having them discover it.
Yeah, and homeschooling is learning through life, right? So it's going to happen in more places than just the kitchen table. And as you're talking about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, it so shows how much of a fabulous teacher you are, and then thinking about it as a parent, and I have come from that teaching, so we're like right here, you know. But as a parent who's not a teacher, thinking about that can seem to me as, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I could see all those things in there, especially if English is my second language or something like that. So how, you know, what other kind of resources, I know you talked about the books, but what other kinds of things can we do to do that kind of a thing with our kids?
There's so much out there.
Learning
Let's
together.
do it. Okay. So from experience, right? I'm a language teacher. I also teach writing. And so like, that's where I come in, but also our kids take French online. I don't speak French fluently, but I know I'm not good enough to teach them French. I don't want them learning French from me. And so who do we turn to? We have a fantastic online teacher. I think we've gone through like 4 teachers now, just from life circumstances. People come in and out, but I love the voices that our kids have had in their language learning classes online. And so we usually start this about the time when they're reading fluently in English. Okay. That's about when we start language classes. And so they're able to sit for 25 minutes. We don't do any more than 25, 30 minutes. That's enough for 6, 7-year-olds to kind of hop into these classes. And they're able to put that framework, because that framework is solidly in there. I know about phonics. I know letters kind of work. You know, French is famously ridiculous in terms of phonics. And so I was like, I'm sorry, children, enjoy. I'm going to take this from somebody else. But we've always found native speakers in another language who are fantastic at teaching. Now, have I guided them in how I want our kids to kind of encounter the language? Yes. Here's why. These are professional teachers. They know what they're doing. But have I said, please, I would like them to have all 4 modes of language: reading, writing, listening, and speaking every class period. Even in 30 minutes, a good teacher can do that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, the class period does not end after those 30 minutes. The time goes on when they have an assignment. So our kids have a Google Doc shared with me, their teacher, and the kid, so that we can all see what's going on. The assignments get put in there at least, you know, within an hour of finishing class, and boom, they're off to the races using what they learned in class to write something. Typically, that's where the writing happens because it's time consuming, and we don't want to waste class time doing that. So can we use Google Translate, Cami? Can we use Google Translate? Yes, we can. Correct. Because this is real life. Again, when you're out on the street and you're trying to order something in another country, what do? We translate it, right? So starting with that, sure, totally fine. Do it. Do we want to wean them off of that? Yes. And they will, in my experience, I could be wrong, but they will self-wean from the translate because it's faster. I already know this. I don't need to copy and paste the whole thing in there because I actually can read what she asked me to do. So I don't have to translate the whole of the assignment. Cool. And so having these opportunities to find teachers. Now, there are a lot of places you can go to find language teachers and tutors, great places like India.com, Outschool.com, Preply is kind of where we've hung out for a while. But other independent educators like me, we have language teachers here at Curio. And so these are the types of things that we would love to help you with. And as you can see, they're coming from the experience of being a mom of a kid in a class. I'm like, I know what we're looking for. I know we're trying to use this time effectively. And I know it's an investment. So I think that's another thing to think about. What is your curriculum budget throughout the year? This is probably, live classes are going to be one of those higher cost items on there.
Yeah.
So figuring out where you can manage the budget to make that work. Group classes will cost less, but sometimes you can do a pair class, 2-on-1 class, and that is much cheaper. And so if you can find your child's buddy, maybe who would be into it, talk to some other homeschool parents in your area and see if you guys can go in on a class. A lot of teachers will be up for that. But find a way. There's definitely a way. Apps are okay. Duolingo is fine. But I think of those as extras and supports. Do your Duolingo, do your, our kids don't watch movies in English anymore. They can only watch a movie if it's in French. And so if we, get a movie from the library and it happens to not have French language options, sorry, you can't watch that. So we're pretty serious about it, and they don't complain. They've got it okay now. So there's a lot that can be done in terms of support, but I think the classes and the instruction are really important. And of course, later on, you could kind of scale back those classes if your child really, really grasps it well.
I agree 100% because it's so much about the pronunciation, but then also I know that great teachers also include the other beautiful aspect of language and focusing on that, which I definitely, I know we're running short on time, but I can't not cover this, is really the culture and the worldview that language gives you. Because as I said this morning in our emails, I said that if you're looking at, like, an example that I read one time when I was in college is if they don't have, a language doesn't have the word for green in that you have in your language, if it's different, yeah, it might mean green, but it also might have a completely different thought structure that goes with that color, that goes with that word than we have. And so knowing those kinds of things and being able to think more broadly about it is so huge. Can you talk about, like, what language brings outside, even if we're not in a bilingual family, whatever the case? But I do recommend language for sure, language learning, because of this one aspect of this big picture. So can you talk a little bit about what else it gives us?
Yeah, I would say it conveys, like, values in a culture. Now, cultures are not monolithic. We know that well. Like, you need to really take away any stereotypes that you have about that culture, because especially in 2025, like, things are different all around the world, right? But at the same time, you're going to see some of the things that are deeply rooted in a culture. Here's an example. If I say, I saw your aunt today. I saw your aunt today. Great, that's fine. But I could also say in English, I saw Sarah today, and she happens to be your aunt. But in Spanish, I would never say that. I would always say your aunt. I saw your aunt today. Why? Because it's the family bond. It's, before anything else, you're going to refer to the relationship, and then you could use their name later on. But it's always going to be the family relationship first, not just the name. So that's just one example, but I've seen this happen in bilingual families too. And for those who are watching, maybe self-evaluate here. This was actually when I was teaching at an international school here. We had a lot of bilingual families, and kids would come in and they would speak great English. They would speak fantastic English. But when it came to food vocabulary, they're like, I don't know the word for that. Kitchen vocabulary, I don't know the word for, frying pan or spatula or something. And I'd be like, that's so weird. Like, I know your mom is a really great English speaker. Why? It's the heart. I want to convey this in my language, right? When we got to tools, they would be like, I don't know what that is. That screwdriver, hammer. Why? It's Dad's kingdom, and Dad wants to teach them in his heart language, whatever it was, right? And so I am hyper cognizant of that now, and I want to make sure that they have these this well-rounded vocabulary too. So when you're choosing and looking at language options, make sure kids are getting kind of the best of every vocabulary unit. If any of us went through language classes in high school or whatever, you remember your textbook was probably broken up into at the market, at the doctor's office, at the whatever farm. And so you've got these neat packages of vocab, but like that's not how language actually works. It's all in experiences and stuff like that. So when you're choosing your language teacher, make sure there are all these things being brought in. And that's when I think this is like another homeschool superpower, is because you are the one kind of directing their education. You can coordinate with the teacher. I know this teacher's probably talking about this because she told me. And also I can, sneak in some of that vocab into whatever we're cooking today or whatever we're going to go do this weekend, right? And so you're constantly looking at this in a 360 kind of view to say, hey, this is a really holistic education, I think, because you're getting the language coming at it from all angles.
Gosh, I love that the term heart language. I love that because it's so true. It's that whatever you're passionate about sharing, that's what you're going to share. And if they're like, you're not an artist and you didn't paint or something, they're not going to know the words for that. Yeah. And that's such a good example. And what you said about the auntie thing reminded me of my family's half Chinese. My mom's side is Chinese, Hawaiian by culture, though, where they're from Hawaii. And so in Hawaiian culture, we say auntie for everything. Like if you for an elder that you respect, they might not have anything to do bloodline with your family, but if it's a sign of respect for auntie and uncle. That is just who you call people. And so say auntie, whatever, and that's who you're. Anybody else would think, oh, they're related to you. No, they're not related to me at all.
It's the village. It's part of the village.
That's part of the village. Exactly. Yeah. It's so fascinating, you guys, when you learn about that stuff. And I really want you to take advantage of Melissa's classes, language classes, her language resources, because she has way more than just classes, and she has studies and courses and all kinds of things. So Melissa, tell us a little bit about Think Curio and how we get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah. At Curio, we've got language, learning, writing, and public speaking. For the most part, we've got lots of printable resources. You can pick a few up for free if you want over at thinkcurio.com. So those are really meant to kind of go hand in hand with this. If you're bilingual, this is for you. Please go get them, especially the free stuff. Try them out. There's English, French, and Spanish. And we have those classes to offer as well. And in terms of writing, we've got full year warm-up journals. Again, same idea. My kids do this. They have a Spanish warm-up journal and an English warm-up journal. And guess what? They mean the same thing on day one. So from day one, it's just translated. And so they're getting that repetition. They're seeing that kind of background knowledge build over time because they're experiencing it in both languages. So if that's you guys, I hope this will be just a boost to you, because it is hard. It's hard when you're first starting out to say, okay, what's going to fit? And look around, find those things that fit. But I hope we can be of service, and lots of things over on our YouTube channel, Think Curio Learning. And it's just been a really fun journey to kind of put this in action and see other homeschool families, especially bilingual families, really pick up on this.
I think it's amazing. I think you're amazing, and I love your content. I think it's absolutely fabulous, and you definitely know how to put together engaging lessons that incorporate there's a lot of intention behind what you do, so I really appreciate that. And I encourage all of you guys to check out that, including her free resources on thinkcurio.com. So I will see you guys again next week. Thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. And you guys definitely check out language learning. You will not be sorry. It's so fascinating when you get into really the details of doing it together. Remember, it's a family affair. Homeschooling is a family affair. So, all right, you guys, I will talk to you again next week, and have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Bye.